The weather couldn't be better to be working outside. The snow is rapidly going away. It's a muddy mess, but soon enough, we will be working on some of the big summer projects that we've been talking about all winter. By getting the flatbed on the 1-ton crew cab Chevy truck, it's one more project I can check off the list, leaving more room for bigger projects once the ground dries out. I've been waiting to do this job for a good part of winter. The Bradford flatbed showed up a few weeks ago, and I finally had a chance to run down and pick it up. And now I want to get it installed on the truck before I do the lift and the wheels and tires on the crew cab. In my opinion, the Bradford aluminum flatbed is by far the best looking flatbed out there, but they're also built to work. And this summer, I'm going to put this truck to work. Thank you guys that sent me suggestions and ideas on the skid steer. What I've decided to do is a couple of different things in regards to troubleshooting. The first thing that I did is I ran to town and I picked up the necessary hydraulic fittings and a gauge that I can plumb into the auxiliary port right here while I'm using it. So the last time I tested the hydraulic pressure, I started it up, saw that it was over 2,000 PSI, and I basically turned it off. Now I'm going to run it around for a little bit with that gauge on there. The second thing that somebody suggested that I do is replace or switch the coil packs from left to right. And this is the electronic portion of the solenoid. To take those off, it's a fairly easy job, and switch them from left to right. And if my problem switches sides, I now know where the issue is. The third suggestion, which I think is a good idea, is to change that hydraulic filter one more time. That filter ran with the old fluid, and it's possible there's water in there. It is a cellulose filter. I couldn't find a better quality filter than that. So I have a new filter coming that will go with the new hydraulic fluid. So the first thing I'm going to do is install that test gauge. While I'm working on the crew cab, I'm slowly working through the problems with the skid steer. Again, once the ground dries out, the skid steer will also be getting used on a regular basis around our summer projects. By installing the gauge, I can confirm for sure that it is in fact not the hydraulic pump. And that's what I figured out here. Okay, so now it's locked out. Whatever's happening, it's locked out. I just opened the auxiliary port. It's still 2,500 PSI there. I just wonder if it's not opening up the brakes for some reason. I'm gonna back my truck up to pull that cab back so I don't hurt my back. That cab's pretty heavy. As I used the machine, it was consistently running at 2,500 PSI, which confirms the main pump is okay. But I'm still having this issue where after 20 to 30 minutes, the right side locks up. So now, because this thing is locked out, I'm gonna switch the solenoids and see if it makes a difference. It would have been pretty easy to go out and buy a newer, nicer, more dependable skid steer. But for what I paid for this machine, it's worth the effort to work through the few little problems that it has. Now that I know the motor and the main hydraulic pump are both good, even if I had to replace a drive motor, that doesn't bother me at this point. But when I got in there, I saw ground wire that was loose, but from where it was coming from, I don't know if it's relevant or not, but I went ahead and reconnected that to the body. And then I switched those two coils. I switched a coil from the hydrostat side to the lift arm side and vice versa. So let's see if it makes a difference. For that first 20 minutes, when it is running good, it runs great. But once that right side locks up, it's basically stuck sitting wherever it happens to be for at least a few hours until it decides to release that right brake. So it just did it there again. That right side, for some reason, I switched those solenoids, and I'll tell you, the controls have never been, since I've had it, they've never felt so sensitive. So that made a big difference. So I may go ahead and order a couple of those coil packs anyway. But just right there, as I was running it, that right brake on that right drive motor feels like it's engaging. And so for some reason, the pressure's dropping in that side, and it's locking up. So I'm going to start working on the flatbed. I'm going to do more research on this. I'm going to run into town and get the other filter that I need, change that filter, but start trying to figure out what's going on with that right drive motor that would cause it to do that. Okay, this is the pressure relief valve. There's a nut and some washers that go on this end. If you look really closely, there's some wear marks there. Nothing that I can feel with my nail. I made sure those little holes were open. I'm gonna take some super fine sandpaper, emery cloth is what I call it, and just give it a quick once over just where the marks are, and see if that helps. And I'm gonna put it back together. Process of elimination, slowly going through and just making sure that we know the obvious stuff is working. When I pulled the pressure relief valve out of there, it appeared to have a little bit of buildup that could have come from water. And because this machine sat for over 6 months with hydraulic fluid that may have had a little bit of water in it, it was important to me to clean out these parts that could have been affected by it. And this was one of those parts. Okay, so we did it again. That is the, it ran better. It definitely ran better. Cleaning up that pressure relief valve has something to do with it. But now the right side's locked out, and it seems to not be building enough pressure to release it. So I worked late last night getting all of the bracing secured to the frame. I'm gonna paint it. Then I'm gonna back the truck up under the flatbed and then weld the C-channel under the aluminum flatbed to the frame. Again, this portion will be bolted to the frame, then welded to the flatbed in case I ever need to take it off in the future. So that's the plan. I'm gonna quickly paint all this stuff that I'm not gonna be able to get to once the bed is in place. There's a possibility that this flatbed will come off at some point down the road after I've done the Cummins swap on this truck, long enough for me to paint it. Okay, I am ready to pull the truck up under the bed. My little brother went back to Arizona. I'm here by myself. I've got to be really careful about how I do this. I don't want to drop the bed. I don't want to hurt myself. So I've got it up high enough where I can pull a portion of the way up under that bed. Then I have to move the jacks and do it again. So let's see how this goes. When I pull the bed off at that point in time, there's a couple other spots that I'd like to weld when I have a little bit better access to the place where the flatbed mounts to these brackets that I made on the frame. Okay, I've got it sitting on all the braces. I just need to slide it around a little bit, get the tape measure out, make sure everything's good, and then weld it. I don't want to paint the rest of the truck until I get all the bugs worked out with installing the Cummins diesel into it. Okay, that's pretty close to where it's going to go. It looks perfect. I didn't want it sitting too low on the frame. By putting that 3-inch up front, 2.5 in the back, it's perfect. Once this thing gets the 6-inch lift, the wheels and tires, it'll be perfectly proportioned. My number one objective at this point in time is to get the truck on the road and ready to be used. All right, I have the bed sitting exactly where I want it. I measured it. I'm using the old hitch as kind of my center point. I measured it, made sure everything was correct. And the hitch on the new bed has to be strutted. That's the words they used. So what I'm gonna do is weld it to the old hitch. I cut the front of the old hitch off. So I'm gonna weld the two receivers together, and I'm gonna weld it in a way where if I ever had to cut it and take it off, it wouldn't be that hard. But I'll probably put a bead on both sides of it. And then it's gonna be a process of welding to these brackets that I put on last night. The only concern is near the fuel tanks. This side of the tank is a galvanized tank. The other side is a plastic tank. And so I think what I'm gonna do is wet a whole bunch of old rags down, set them on top of that fuel tank, just to be super careful. And actually there's no fuel in that other tank, but anybody that knows that an empty tank has more fumes in them, which has potentially more chance of exploding than a fuel tank does. A full fuel tank does. but either way, I don't want to find out. So I'm going to weld this side, weld the hitch, and then work my way down that other side. When I get to the other side, I'm going to cover it with some wet rags, some saturated rags, so there's no chance that anything could happen. Because the flatbed has a fifth wheel hitch, this allows me to potentially take a bigger trailer and use that trailer for hauling logs for many of the projects that I have lined up over summer. At some point when I do decide to paint the rest of the truck, I'll pull the flatbed off, get it up in the air, and lay a few more welds down, ensuring that the flatbed is connected properly to the square tubing that I use to mount it to the truck. But like I said, step one is getting the truck on the road. But the welds that I'm putting down now will be more than adequate, but it never hurts my feelings to do a little bit more when it comes to something like this. Having a flatbed on your truck in a small western town is most definitely a statement. While I'm not sure what that statement is, it definitely has something to do with farming and ranching. But I can tell you, after having the flatbed on my old red Ford truck that I built a few years back, when it comes to doing the kind of work that I do, there is no better accessory than having a good quality flatbed. I jokingly told my little brother last week that if I want to fit in properly, I'll find me a couple of border collies, maybe a bale of hay, and an old saddle to throw back there, just to convince everybody that we are really doing some ranching up here at our place. But as it seems that our flock of goats is always expanding, the next time I go to pick up hay, I will definitely be able to put more hay on this bed than I will in my Dodge truck. I can't wait to put the new flatbed to work, and I can't wait to put the truck to work. Okay, the plan for the rest of the day is to get the filler necks connected and then get the brake lights wired up. But we had some friends, some longtime friends reach out to us from Arizona that are passing through, and they're going to stop by and spend the afternoon with us. And so I may have to put some of this on hold until tomorrow, but that's basically all that I have left. Everything else is done. It's all welded up. And then it's the lift kit and the wheels and tires. And this bed looks like it's a dually bed, but it is not, in fact, a dually bed. It's just a tad wider than what the factory bed would be. So once I get my new wheels and tires on it, it'll be perfectly proportioned. But I'm excited. This is going to probably end up being my daily driver. That's my gut feeling.